Okay, welcome to the WPIAL Blitz Show. My name's Bruce Badgley, and with me, as always, my man, the myth, the legend, Ian McMeans. And Ian, why don't you introduce our special guest that we've got tonight to start the show?
Yeah, we're very honored to have Draper Gilliam on the show. Most of you may know him as the Wpial team builder. I remember from back in like 2013, 2014, downloading Wpial teams into NCAA football games that you made. And so it's
Nice.
really cool now, a decade later that EA has re-released the college football game
Yeah, for
finally. It
sure.
took them long enough that you're back at it and building Wpial teams that people can go and play with their high schools in the game, which is super cool. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how you got into just designing teams for video games and things like that? Because it's awesome.
Okay, first I'd like to thank Bruce and you, Ian, for having me here today. It's a great opportunity to come here and speak. And I first got into it around like 2012. I think it was NCAA 13. Around the time I was probably like 13 years old, 13, 12 years old. And that's when I first started creating teams on the game. At first, it started because I was in like eighth grade and I was going to, I went to Moon area at the time. So like I wanted to put myself in the game. Like, and I used to be lifting with the high school team and stuff. So like I'm like, I want to play with these guys in the game. I want to be able to play them against Robert Foster and Russell Sale and who else? Like Tori Delmonico. They played against killers that year. Like, so I'm like, I want to play this in the game. Like I can't go out there and play with them right now. So I'm gonna put them in the game. So that's where it all started. Then it just turned into something that I like to do. And I started making everybody build a platform for it. Everybody wanted to play as themselves in the game. And I just took it and ran with it. I was a kid, and it's just what I like to do at the time, be creative.
That's awesome. It's so cool. And I remember downloading your Clareton teams and playing with them when they had, the killer tees of Tyler
Oh
Boyd and
yeah, they were
Parrish Webb,
killers.
and they were awesome. And those Aliquippa teams back then were really good too.
Yeah, with Dre and Terry
Yep. Yep.
and Malik Shagog. Yeah, they had the Whitfield was loaded. That was a time to be alive.
It was. It was.
Hey, look, the Wpial is pretty loaded now. What are some of the teams that you like or that can that are in this year's group of teams that can move over, or is that really up to the individual to create the team that they can import into the game?
It's like where people when people download my teams, they can just put the Whitfield team builder in, and all my teams will appear. If you want to create your own, you have to create an EA account, and it's kind of tricky because I make logos, I make the when teams have like special uh designs and stripes on their jerseys, I design those as well. So I put a lot of time into it. So I don't know if you're an artsy person, it's definitely for you. If you know how to like graphic design, it's like a heaven. It's like heaven for a graphic designer and a football fan.
What would stop you from like rolling this out across all of the PIAA teams in the state to be able to,
Uh,
you know,
that's a lot of time, and like I do this for free. So like just because it's what I like to do, and the kids love it. So I want to give every kid an opportunity to at least be in the game and play with your friends, and that's cool. Like I think that's cool. I like doing it.
Yeah. So you started with making the defending Whippeal champions, and I've seen you've added some more teams from there.
Yes,
So
sir.
you spend a lot of time designing these teams. Do you get a chance to play with them too?
Yeah, I have to play with them when I'm designing them to make sure like everybody's ratings is right. I don't want somebody too fast or somebody too strong, somebody too OP, and other than the star player. So like I put a lot of time into it. For like speeds, if you're a track guy, I pulled your track time up. I watch a lot of film. I was a top 22 player. I was a first team all conference cornerback. So I feel like I do a pretty good job rating the guys. When more film rolls out, I update guys. So I want to stay on top of it and make the game as realistic as possible.
That's awesome. And I've seen that you've like posted updates that as, games happen this year, you're updating guys' stats. So not only are
Yeah.
you creating the teams and accurate rosters that people could go download, but you're updating them week by week based on what's happening, which is really cool.
And that's what EA does with Madden and NCAA. So I wanted to bring that, implement that part into what I have going on.
That's really cool. So, what's next? You've done kind of some of the high level teams. Are you going to try and get all 124 Wpial teams by the time the season's over? That's a
By the
that's a
time the
pretty
season's
arduous
over,
task.
yeah, by the time the season's over, I should have majority of the teams. I'll probably bust like 100 out by the time the season's over. The season's long, so everybody doesn't go to the playoffs. So a lot of guys that have a chance to play with themselves
That's
by the time
that's
that
really
time
cool.
comes.
So are you
So
gonna do like a playoff simulation then and simulate brackets and be like, here's
I
my
might,
Wpial team builder champion?
I might do that. That's some fire content. I might do it.
So where can people get a hold of you? And I mean, do you have a website or
I don't.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't have a website. I definitely need a website just to seem a little more professional. But no, I'm on social media, my personal social media. You can find me on Facebook, Draper Gilliam, my name, or on Twitter, I'm the Wpial Team Builder. So if you ever want to reach out to me, you can always reach out to me on that account. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm there.
Yeah. And I saw you're also offering, since you're doing all this for free for the Wpial teams, but you're also offering to do some personalized stuff that people can pay you for too.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you wanna, I'm gonna do some classic teams, like it's some old teams that I want to put into the newer game after I do this for the kids first.
He committed to
But yeah,
make a
for
new
sure, if you
logo
want a
for me
classic
for my
team, you
Fresh Set of
definitely can
Downs
reach out to me.
podcast.
Yeah. That's great. That's really cool. So we don't want to take too much of your time because you probably have things to do tonight rather than
Yeah.
talk to us. So I have two last questions for you. So one is who's your favorite team that you've played with so far that you've made?
Oh, the Clips for sure. The Clips. I love running the ball with Tyke and Sanair behind the line. The defense is crazy. We have a plethora of linebackers that's going to be coming this year. They're coming strong.
That's a great answer. I mean, you can't
Yes,
go wrong
sir.
with Aliquippa.
Yeah,
Bruce
right.
Yeah.
Bruce has learned from doing the
Yeah.
show with me for
And in
5
case
years.
people didn't know, I mean, Draper lives in Aliquippa, so and played for him, right?
Yeah. I'm here right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Bruce knows from doing the show with me for 5 years that you never pick against Aliquippa, regardless of the situation. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
don't go against the Clips.
Never pick
That's like
against the
going
Clips.
against Brady.
True, it's true. So one other thing that we're gonna try and do every week this year on the show is to have a Wpial Team Builder Game of the Week, where you whip up a graphic for us that kind of shows two teams playing in what's going to be the game of the week. So really cool that you were willing to do this for us. So who's your game of the week for week one? I think I know who probably is, but
The Clips, the defending 4A champs against the defending 3A champs.
it's
I got
the
the Clips winning big.
Ooh, yeah.
Big.
Bell Vernon's a very well coached team, and they're a good squad, but they lost a lot to graduation. So yeah, I agree with you that
They did. They
it's
have some dog. They have some dogs there. I watched a lot of their film. They got some guys that can play.
it's in the pit, or yeah, the new pit, Heinz Field.
Yeah, it's still
yeah.
a pit
Yeah.
for sure.
So yeah, cool. That's great. So our Wpial Team Builder Week 1 game of the week is Bell Vernon at Aliquippa, which is really cool. And hopefully this as the season goes on, if we're able to whip up some graphics for each week, we can announce it and keep promoting what you're doing. And as you have new teams come out, we're happy to help promote that and try and get the word out there, because you're doing all this for free out of the good of your heart, and it's really cool that you're giving everyone across Western Pennsylvania the opportunity to play as their own high school team in the new video game. So that's awesome. So thank you for everything that you do, because it's really cool.
Appreciate all the love, you guys. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. We'll be in touch. Believe me. I think we got a new regular contributor here, Ian, to not only the Wpial podcast, but even my Fresh Set of Downs podcast as well, like a game of the week. We'll talk definitely, Draper,
I'll
and
definitely have some
obviously
graphics
spread the
up for you
word.
guys.
Yeah, maybe we can find somebody who can whip you up a website, and that would be
Oh yeah, some developers. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could do it pretty quick through AI, but like, who's gonna like maybe, comp him a website thing that he can, get going there. So I guess that's our first course of action here.
Yeah. And yeah, so look for our Whippeal Team Builder game of the week as we go through the season. We'll have some graphics as part of the show, which will be pretty sweet. And yeah, and maybe back, when we get to playoff time, we can have you on again and have you, tell us who your simulated champions are after the bracket
Well,
comes
yeah,
out.
right. I can't even imagine, it'd be cool to have him on because we do the state championship broadcast, whatever like that, and incorporate what you're doing into what we're doing. I think it's great stuff.
So yes, sir. I'm excited to team up with you guys. So I look forward to it.
We're
Just let
excited
me
to
know.
meet you too. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us,
All right.
Draper, and thanks for everything
All
you
right,
do,
see you.
man.
No problem. Keep doing what you guys are doing. I love it.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Draper. Take care now. Just go ahead and exit out.
All right.
All right. Wow. Look at
That
there. A
is
brand new contributor there. I mean, my gosh, look at the, kind of the contributions we got there, PA football history and, Draper and what have you. I mean, good stuff, Ian.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that he was only like 13 years old when he started doing it because I remember, playing those games. I was, gosh, 2013, 2014. I was out of grad school by that point. Like I had a couple kids by then. I have for new watchers of the show, I have many children. So and so it's I have six. So I had two kids at that point, but I was, have a baby on my lap playing NCAA football. And then Twitter's a thing. And I see that there's this, Wpial team builder and you can go download these teams of Wpial rosters and the uniforms are all decked out like exactly how they are. He does such a good job. Like his attention to detail is amazing. Some of the screenshots he's already posted on Twitter, you can go check them out on his account. Like not only has he done the teams, but he's done the stadiums too. So you can download, like if you download like North Allegheny, you can get their stadium too and actually play as their team in their field. So
Wow.
it's really cool, what he's been able to do on the new platform with the new, I guess it's college football 25 now, not NCAA football like it used to be, but
Yeah, right.
same thing. It's the EA Sports college football video game. So go check it
Wow.
out. It's great.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, this would be great if we can kind of partner up with him and kind of turn that into a thing here in Pennsylvania, man. That'd be ultra cool.
Yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And you know how much I love graphics and all that. So the
Yes.
more the more visuals we can add to the show, the better, because I always feel like it supplements, all the good stuff that we talk about during the show,
Sure.
because people can watch us just talk for a little while, but having the graphics really helps I think really helps spice things up.
I totally agree.
So on that note,
On that note, yeah.
yeah, we can dive into our week 0 recap here, moving into week 1 of the regular season. So thanks everyone who's joining us live on YouTube or watching us later. We appreciate everyone's support for the show. You can find my articles on steelcityblitz.com. You can check us out on social media. You know where to find us, all that good stuff. So we had a lot of big results in week 1. I could not pick a single game of the week because we had 3 games go to overtime, and then West Mifflin against Elizabeth Forward. Elizabeth Forward scored a touchdown to tie the game with no time left on the clock, and then fumbled the snap on the extra point, and West Mifflin wound up winning. So,
Wow.
3 overtime games plus that game that ended at the buzzer. Those are my games of the week for week 0, because those were just all really, really good games. Armstrong and Highlands in an absolute shootout. Lake, Ohio scored a 2-point conversion in double overtime to beat McKeesport. The biggest wins of the week, though, New Brighton ended the second longest losing streak in the Wpial. They had a 21 game losing streak that they hadn't won a game the whole last cycle. And in the first quarter against Shenango, they got a safety and then returned the ensuing free kick for a touchdown to go up 9-0 and just hung on to win 9-7 to end that long drought of over 2 years without a victory. And then Hopewell had kind of a down season the last couple years, but got a big win over Riverside. Their freshman quarterback, Boo Boo Armstrong, had an incredible game. So that's definitely a player and a team to watch on the rise as this season goes on. We knew that Montour was good. We knew Montour was really good. They were a 4A semifinal team last year. But they lost a couple guys to graduation, and Central Valley, moving down in classification, was the number 1 ranked team in 3A in the state. So, I called this my upset of the week, even though like we knew Montour was a really good team, but to go out and beat Central Valley, who was the top ranked 3A team in the state, I think is a pretty big statement win early in the year for Montour.
I think it was the say what game in the state of Pennsylvania, quite honestly.
Yeah. It was Montour. The problem for Montour is they play in a conference with Aliquippa. So it's like you've got this juggernaut in the Quips that, and I don't think Montour is better than Aliquippa. I think Montour is really good. Montour might be the second or third best team in 4A, but when you have Aliquippa in your conference and then have to go through them just to win a Wpial title, it's a long road to hoe for Montour. But that's a really good squad they've got this year too.
Well, I think that win does a lot because you've got the committee that's going to create the seedings or add a couple extra teams or whatever like that. And, because of that, this win, it doesn't matter whether they're button heads with Aliquippa. I think that they would probably get a pretty fair shake from the committee. What do you think?
I think so, if the committee takes week 0 games into account. And that's kind of the wild card because it's not part of the quote unquote normal 9-week regular season. I'm not sure how much they're going to wait week 0 results. So that remains to be seen.
Between 2 Wpial teams, come on.
Yeah,
I can understand if it's a Wpial versus a non-Wpial team, but I think, if it's a 2 Wpial teams, button heads or whatever like that, I think the committee is going to take that into account. Let's just say, let's hope so. I mean, it's not like, they beat somebody in a vacuum here. I mean, they beat Central Valley, and I think that is a very noteworthy win as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other noteworthy results: Jeanette beating Mount Pleasant. So, Mount Pleasant's a decent 3A team. Jeanette's been turning it around in 1A, but anytime a 1A team beats a 3A team, very, very noteworthy. Wow. Neshannock and Mohawk, 2 teams from up in Lawrence County, got into an absolute shootout. Neshannock, one of the favorites in 1A this year, especially in the Big 7 conference, and Mohawk figures to be a contender in 2A once again. Norwin with a resounding rivalry game victory over neighboring Penn Trafford. Norwin moved up to 6A this year, and if you remember back to our season preview show with John, we talked about is Norwin going to sneak into that last playoff spot in 6A? So beating a very solid 5A Penn Trafford team, who is your rival, is a noteworthy result. So congrats to Norwin on that one.
I was totally impressed with that win. Totally impressed with Norwin.
Yeah. And then Beaver, who we also talked about on the season preview show, beating Westinghouse, who went to the 2A state championship game last year, moved down to 1A, is the sort of presumed favorite in 1A. Now, granted, Beaver's a very strong 3A program, so I don't think this is any kind of knock on Westinghouse. They'll still win the Pittsburgh City League. They'll still be a threat to win the state title. But this was kind of an iron sharpens iron game. These were 2 very good teams going at it, and Beaver came out on top, which is an impressive victory for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Chris Elm on the chat said Clairton over Steel Valley, noteworthy. What do you think about that, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a Saturday game, which was when I was actually driving home from vacation with all of my kids in the car. So I caught the score later, but I think Clairton won that game like 30-8 or 30-14. It was a resounding victory for Clairton. And that was a Steel Valley team that was the top ranked 2A team in the Wpial coming in, was kind of considered one of the favorites for the 2A title. So very solid victory for Clairton. Clairton has some absolute horses this year. I mean, they've got some skill players that can absolutely fly. And if they can match up in the trenches, they can go a long way this year. And Steel Valley is no slouch in the trenches. So for Clairton to be able to match up with Steel Valley and hold their pretty dynamic rushing attack in check is a big feather in the cap for the Clairton Bears.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff.
All right. So our Wpial Blitz show player of the week is Samir Crosby from Greensburg Central Catholic. Greensburg Central Catholic, very good 1A program. I think
First player of the game I ever recall from Greensburg Central Catholic that we've had in the WPIAL Blitz show. What do you think?
I believe it is, yes. But they were facing Shady Side Academy, who moved from 3A down to 2A this year. So playing against a team from a higher classification, GCC was down 30-12, and Samir Crosby just went off in the second half and ran for like 285 yards in the second half. 6 total touchdowns in the game. GCC came back to win that game, and I think it was 46-40 that they beat Shady Side Academy. So an incredible performance. Did it through the air and on the ground. And we've got some highlights that, thanks to Samir posting them on his huddle page so quickly after the game. But we've got some highlights here that we can show of him just slicing and dicing his way through Shady Side Academy's defense. And for a Greensburg Central Catholic team, he's playing two ways, offense and defense. So you've got some defensive highlights mixed in here too, that he had just an all-around great performance and is well deserving of our week 1 player of the week award. So congratulations to Samir Crosby. Here's another one of his 6 touchdowns. I mean, 6 touchdowns in a game is incredible, and doing it with his arm and his legs, just completely unstoppable.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is going both ways. You just hope that and that obviously happens a lot in the lower classifications. You hope that he can stay fresh the whole season, and that playing linebacker as well as basically being Mr. Offense.
Yes, and that was actually last year. He did not play quarterback. He played kind of all over their offense, kind of as a slot back, wide receiver, running back, did a little bit of everything for him. And one of the kind of questions for Greensburg Central Catholic this year was, how is the offense going to adjust with him moving to quarterback and them losing, one of their big skill position players. But I think, as we've seen over the years, more and more teams have moved to basically just putting their best athlete at quarterback and letting that player touch the ball every play, kind of regardless of everything else happening around them. That in the past, those best athletes were sometimes put at either running back or wide receiver, where they could make more plays in space. But now it seems like a lot of teams have moved more towards these dual threat quarterbacks, where it's like, let's just take our best player, put them at quarterback, and let them touch the ball every play so that they can have an opportunity to make things happen with the ball in their hands.
Well, all I know is that there are season highlights from players. This is just like one game. I mean, there are season highlights for other players that don't match up with what we just watched there for one game for Samir Crosby. So what a performance.
Yeah, it was all around, both sides of the ball. I mean, he had almost 500 yards of total offense between passing and rushing, 6 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. So congratulations to Samir Crosby on a great performance this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of our other top performers: Lee Kwalk, running back from California, had 6 total touchdowns and 372 rushing yards against Sarah Catholic, who moved down from 2A to 1A this year. So impressive performance for Cal out of the Tri-County South against a pretty solid Sarah Catholic team. Looking at that game, on paper beforehand, I thought it was going to be really interesting because Sarah has a pretty good passing game and California is always known for their run game, but Cal was really able to control things up front. They've got a big offensive line, and Lee Kwalk's just got a ton of speed. And I think he only ran, I mean, he was like 3rd or 4th on their depth chart at running back last year. So he only ran for like 600 yards last year or something like that, 560. He could get that in 2 weeks this year. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
372 and 6 touchdowns after 1 week. So,
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
yeah, another big performance in 1A. Tyvon Kershaw from Monessen had 5 total touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 2 on kickoff returns. Drew Wahorski from South Fayette, in his first game as a starter, threw a touchdown pass and ran for 3 more. Radon Kuroda from York, sorry, messed that name up. But 5 total touchdowns for a York team that was kind of, down in the dumps, kind of bottom of the barrel in their conference the last couple years. So I'm pretty sure he's a freshman as well. So stepping in, it's definitely his first year at quarterback for them. So they've got a dynamic playmaker there as well. Jace Powell from Jeanette is part of their big victory over neighboring who they play, Mount Pleasant, 4 total touchdowns. That was a 28-27 game, you'll recall. So he put up all 4 touchdowns for Jeanette, 3 on the receiving end and 1 as a passing touchdown. And then in another Saturday result, Mars went down to Florida to play a team, and credit to Coach Casper. He's never shied away from using these week 0 games to try and find tough opponents to test his teams. A couple years ago, when he was at Pine Richland, they were coming off a state championship, and he brought IMG Academy up here to play against Pine Richland, and they got smoked. But still, it battle tested his team. And this year, he took his Mars team down to Florida to play. I think it was Boone, Florida that they played. But Mars beat them pretty solidly. Luke Goodworth, their quarterback, 365 through the air, 5 passing touchdowns, 3 of them to Gabe Hine, who had, I think, over 200 yards through the air as a receiver. So Mars with a good result this week as well. But congratulations to all of our top performers. And there were a lot of other guys. I mean, pretty much everyone on here put up at least 5 touchdowns. So there were a lot of really good performances of guys that put up, 4 touchdowns, and I'm like, hey, sorry guys, you just didn't make the cut, didn't have enough space on the list for you this week. But this is not to slight anyone that put up 4 touchdowns this week, because that's still an incredible performance. But
there'll be some season totals there. Hey, listen, shout out to Jim Gorman with some kind words, fellow Eastern PA person on the chat here. So said he's glad to have us back. So and we're glad to be back, right, Ian?
We are thrilled to be back. It's we did our season preview show 2 weeks ago, and it was a lot of fun. We had a great slew of guests on 2 weeks ago. Last week we took off because I was on vacation, but we're back now, and we'll be here. Well, I guess next Monday is Labor Day, so maybe we'll do
probably Tuesday evening. I was thinking about that on the golf course tonight.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do the show next week.
Yeah, so we'll be Tuesday next week, but I think every other week the rest of the year we'll be here on Monday nights. So it's great to be back, and it's so early this year though that it's still August, so 2 weeks before Labor Day the season started.
It just didn't, it just seemed really early, is just what you said.
Yeah. So another thing, there were 17 new head coaches in the Wpial this year. 6 of them got their first wins at their current schools, I will say, because some of these guys have coached other places. But congratulations to these guys getting their first victory. Fred Mazziocco from Newcastle defeating General McLean, a District 10 school from up towards Erie. That's a pretty big result, because Newcastle only won 3 games over the last 2 years. So, or maybe it was 2 games. Either way, Coach Mazziocco was the coach at Neshannock the last few years, and had built Neshannock into a pretty solid program, and now takes over at Newcastle, which, going from a 2A program up to a 4A program is a pretty big jump. But I think that's a good match there for him, and Newcastle with a big result in a shootout with General McLean, and his former stomping grounds Neshannock also won in a shootout too. We talked about New Brighton and Hopewell getting their victories. Nice win for Blackhawk over neighboring Beaver Falls as well. And then South Fayette, their longtime legendary coach Jim Rossi retired. We wish him all the best. He was there for a long time, won multiple Wpial titles, a couple state championships there as well. So a great career for Coach Rossi at South Fayette, and Coach Spieler getting his first victory there. And if I recall correctly, I believe Coach Spieler was part of Bob Palko's staff at Mount Lebanon when they won the state title. I don't remember if he was the offensive coordinator
Okay.
or he was one of the offensive coaches though. So that's a pretty good coaching pedigree coming from the Bob Palko coaching tree.
Well, I'll definitely ask Bob if I see him on the sidelines of the West Virginia game on Saturday. I always seem to run into Bob Palco, not at Beaver Stadium, but at all the away games.
Yeah, well, wish him all the best from us here too, because he was very generous with me with his time over the years, and I certainly appreciate everything that he always took the time to talk to me about whatever I wanted to talk to, and even he gave me his cell phone number, so sometimes I'd just text him like, "Hey, congrats on the win" or whatever, and he'd always text me back, and I'm like, "Dude, you have so much going on. I'm just some random dude. Like, you don't have to text me back." But it was
Yeah,
always very
you're more than
generous.
a random dude anyway.
One of the other things we do on the show as our weekly things is our streak watch. So Aliquippa and Bell Vernon, the only two Whippeal teams that won state titles last last year. So they're the only two that enter the season with a lengthier winning streak, or actually any kind of winning streak, beyond the teams that didn't make the playoffs that maybe won their last game. But both of them scrimmaged in week 0, and they play each other this week in the matchup of state champions that Draper talked about at the beginning of the show. So this is going to be a good one. Bell Vernon moving back up from 3A to 4A now, both of them defending state champs facing off coming up here in week 1. The other defending Whippeal champs were 3-1. The only one that lost was Beaver Falls, but let's remember Beaver Falls won this 2A Whippeal title and they lost to a 4A team in Blackhawk. So, not too much to get worried about there for Beaver Falls. North Allegheny, Peters Township, Fort Cherry all getting victories. And on the losing streak side, New Brighton got that victory over Shenango that we talked about earlier, getting a safety and then returning the ensuing free kick for a touchdown to win 9-7. That's a great way to snap
Wow. I mean, that is the definition of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, crime and Atlee.
Well, hey, when you haven't won a game in 3 years, you take it any way you can get it. So congrats to New
Yeah.
Brighton on the victory there. And then Summit Academy, who had a 17-game losing streak, got a victory over Fraser. Summit is a team that's impossible to predict because Summit Academy is a school for adjudicated youth that get sent there basically as part of their, working their way through the justice system because they can't go to whatever other school. But their students are only there for like a 13-month span. So like they have complete roster turnover every year. So their school's always much more focused on like, we're going to use football to teach our kids good life lessons, good discipline, all this other stuff. And if we win a couple games, that's great. But if not, it's the building of teamwork and all that other stuff that matters the most. So they have made the playoffs, I think, twice in their history, but they continue to play a Whippeal schedule and compete. And, congrats to the group of kids there that came out and got a victory for Summit Academy. All right. So now as we shift out of week 0, start to move into the regular season here, week 0 games are scheduled by individual schools so teams can kind of pick their matchups. We saw a lot of teams play either out of state or at least teams from outside the Whippeal. Gateway played State College, Newcastle played General McLean, had a couple teams
Penn
from
Hills
Ohio.
lost to Susquehanna Township.
Yeah. I think Central Catholic played some powerhouse out of Maryland. It's like, the top 15 in the country because they recruit all over the place. And yeah, so now we get into kind of the meat of the season here where weeks 1 through 9 are scheduled by the Whippeal. And because the Whippeal has an even number of teams this year, we don't have any open dates from here on out where teams might be like looking for games. It's all perfectly scheduled where Whippeal teams play Whippeal teams from weeks 1 through 9. So the first 2 weeks of the season are non-conference play. So these will not count towards, I'll say, immediate playoff qualification because one change this year is that the Whippeal has a set number of playoff qualifiers from each conference. It's mostly 3, except in 4A where it's only 2. So the top 2 or 3 teams from each conference automatically qualify for the playoffs. But then in every classification now, the last 2, 3, 4 teams, depending on how many teams get in the playoffs, are decided by the Wpial committee. So they have said that they will count non-conference games as part of their consideration for wildcard teams. So like we talked about earlier with some of the week 0 results, I'm not sure if they're going to count week 0, how that's going to play, but from here on out, these games do matter if you get into a wildcard situation in the eyes of the committee. So this is a little more weight put on the non-conference schedule than has been in the past, where it just didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. The first 2 weeks of the year is just all non-conference play. And then once we get into week 3 and 4, conference play happens for teams in conferences with either 7 or 8 teams. And then for the teams in conferences that just have 6 teams, they'll start conference play in week 5. So we have, a full slate of schedule ahead of us, but now we're starting to get into the games that really matter. So our week 1 games of the week, obviously the big one, Bell Vernon at Aliquippa, the matchup of defending state champions. And that's going to be a heck of a game, just all around. Bell Vernon just plays so solid, under Coach Humbert, and is always very technically sound. They've got some good players, but I mean, when you lose a guy like Quentin Martin, went to Penn State and was a lot of their offense, they've got good players, but that's a big piece to lose, to have to replace them. And Aliquippa brings a ton of guys back, including Tyke Hayes, another Penn State commit. And Aliquippa is just absolutely loaded. They've got great linebackers, great secondary, and they've got some dudes down in the trenches too. I like Aliquippa in this one, but just the fact that we get the 2 defending state champs matching up in week 1 is a really cool matchup to have.
Well, I like the fact too that I think a lot of these teams, or the Wpial, in this scheduling here, have, I think, too often I think teams try and maybe, overstep, who they try and play, where these are games that are all just like top shelf competitive, where teams will be able to measure themselves for how they're going to stack up during the regular season. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing that I noticed the Wpial did a really good job of this year, was trying to match teams with, I'll say, like or similar teams in non-conference scheduling. You get Washington and Steel Valley, 2 teams that were semifinalists in 2A playing each other. Thomas Jefferson and Central Valley, TJ's still up in 4A. Central Valley moved down to 3A, but was the number 1 ranked team in the state in 3A before they lost to Montour last week. But again, 2 powerhouse teams, some old rivals as well with, Central Catholic and Pine Richland. They're in different classifications, but 2 very strong programs. You've got, Bishop Canevin and Seton LaSalle, 2 Catholic schools from the South Hills playing each other. Penn Hills and Woodland Hills, old rivals playing each other, not in a conference anymore, but anytime you get those 2 going head to head, it's going to be a heck of a game. McKeesport, McKeesport lost in the 4A championship game last year against Peters Township, the defending 5A champion. So another one of 2 very strong teams. And I threw Jefferson Morgan and Waynesburg on here too, because last year, I think we talked to people from both schools. I think we talked to the head coach from Waynesburg, and was it the superintendent from Jefferson Morgan?
Jefferson Morgan, right? Because he was on the the Wpial staff.
Yeah, he was on the committee that did the playoffs. But both of those teams snapped long playoff droughts last year. Waynesburg in 2A, Jefferson Morgan in 1A, but they're like neighboring districts down in rural Greene County. So, having them play each other as 2 kind of up and coming rising programs that are neighboring districts, even though it's a 2A, 1A, they're close enough in size that I think it's a pretty cool matchup to give the fans too. Same with Clareton and Sarah Catholic. They're from right up the river from each other. That a lot of these games, not only are they games with relatively evenly matched teams, but they're games in close geographic proximity that you don't have to travel a long ways. Maybe they had long-standing traditional rivalries that took place over the years. So they're going to get fans into the stands, which really at the end of the day, when when the Wpial had non-conference schedules where teams were traveling, 60, 70 miles for a non-conference game against someone they'd never played before, like it's hard to get fans to travel for that. It's I mean, players are going to get up and play whoever they have to play. I'm not worried about the players. It's just like, getting fans out to the games and getting excitement around the teams and the games. Games like this generate a lot more excitement than how they used to structure the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, just a really good, slate of non-league games.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing I like too is when they're matching kind of like teams against each other, or similar caliber teams, that if it comes down to a wild card situation, you're going to get a better read on a team if they've played other good teams than you
Sure.
are if it was like, oh, we played you know I'll use
Yeah,
a
if they had
college
a
football
non-league
analogy.
schedule of the Little Sisters of the Poor and F&M Furniture, it isn't going to be
Right.
that. Is it going to match up too well?
Right. Like, you don't get a good read on, you know, Alabama or Georgia when they just beat up on Jacksonville State and, Kennesaw State. Like, it's like, okay, thanks for playing those games, but like, we don't know how good you are as a college football team.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing here, right? Like, if you play a team dramatically different from you, it doesn't do a whole lot other than prove you're better than them. And it could actually, put the lower team in a worse possible situation, because there were a couple teams actually that had to cancel their week 0 games because of, short rosters and injuries and things like that. So hopefully everyone's able to get healthy and be out there for week 1. We're rooting for everyone to have a scheduled week 1 game.
That's right.
Yeah. So some of our friends of the show, KDKA Radio, that broadcasts a premier game of the week, and our friend Dan Zangrelli, who does the play-by-play for that, he has come on the last few years for our season wrap-up show. They do a great job at KDKA, and they have a post-game show where they run through all the scores. I got to be on it once last year, so I highly recommend tuning in for it. But maybe I'll be lucky enough to be on it again sometime
I'm
this
sure
year.
you will.
But they're doing the Bell Vernon Aliquippa game this week, so that should be a heck of a game. I think the Central Catholic Pine Richland game's on TV as well, on 22 The Point. And then our friends at WMBS out of Uniontown are doing the Laurel Highlands Ambridge game. Laurel Highlands got a nice victory over neighboring rival Uniontown in week 0. Uniontown's playing an independent schedule once again this year, but the schedule actually sets up pretty well for Laurel Highlands. They struggled through some injuries last year, but they've got a pretty good schedule that, they're still going to have to play Thomas Jefferson this year. They're going to have to play Bell Vernon, but the rest of the schedule puts them in a position to get some victories and to kind of help keep building their program. We've had Coach Colasar on from Laurel Highlands before, so he's a friend of the show, and we wish them all the best this year too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so our PA football history Wpial look back, since it is 2024 this year. Each week we're going to be kind of looking back at another decade of Wpial football. So we actually get to look back 110 years to the first
only 110.
Only 110 to the first ever Wpial champions, which was the Wilkinsburg Tigers. So found this picture on an old article on the Trib, that this was a picture of the first ever Wpial championship trophy that was awarded. So it was the Pittsburgh chapter of the Syracuse University Alumni Association awarded it to Wilkinsburg in 1914. The following year was the first time they actually played a championship game, and Wilkinsburg won that too. So they were a pretty dominant powerhouse back 110 years ago in the early days of the Wpial. Wilkinsburg High School ceased to exist about a decade ago, and so the Wilkinsburg kids go to different districts now. Some of them go to Westinghouse in the city, and they've always had good athletes come out of Wilkinsburg, but it's kind of a neighborhood that's had its share of issues over the years, but has had some revitalization in recent years too. But Wilkinsburg was awarded the first ever Wpial championship trophy 110 years ago. So as we go through the season, next week we'll do 1924, and then we'll keep doing each decade to kind of look back and see how things have changed. But back then, only one classification, and there was a committee that just awarded the trophy before they actually started playing championship games, which happened the following year. So pretty cool to be able to have the opportunity this year to say, hey, this was the first ever Wpial champions, and look all the way back 110 years.
Boy, you hold your breath just by even talking about 110 years like that.
It's a long time.
That's a long time.
A long time. All right. So, if you enjoy listening to me talk, and I do a lot of talking, so maybe you do, maybe you don't. I hope you do if you stay tuned to the show this long. But if you enjoy listening to me talk, you can also check out the Steel City Blitz podcast, which I am on. It airs on Thursday nights at around 10 o'clock live on YouTube, or check it out on any platform. That has a little bit more of a grown-ups vibe to it than this one. This is more of this is a high school show. That one's much more of four guys sitting around having a few drinks and talking and swearing about the Steelers because they do a lot of things that make us swear. But at any rate, you can check me out on that show, and Bruce's Fresh Set of Downs show, which covers everything Eastern PA football related, is also out there for you to check out too.
Yeah, we normally will be doing the show on Tuesdays, Fresh Set of Downs. Unfortunately, this week I had kind of not with me, but just kind of a family thing, and out of respect for family, whatever like that, we're gonna just kind of postpone it this week. But we'll be back next week with the Fresh Set of Downs. That's typically Dave Micah, myself, Bob Long, kind of on a rotating basis there, cover everything with Eastern football and what have you. So,
and Dave and Bob and you all kind of teamed up to do our state championship preview show last year, which turned out great. So I'm a big fan of those guys and the work they do. Very, very knowledgeable guys about all things Eastern PA. So, for folks watching this show, I know we're just entering week 1 of the season, but before you know it, we're going to be getting into the statewide brackets, and things are going to start happening very quickly that we're going to need to know, as far as Wpial teams, who's out there and who we're going to be facing once we get into the state bracket. So it's worth tuning into the Fresh Set of Down show to see who's playing well and who to watch out for out of the East.
Yeah, we appreciate that for sure. It is a lot of fun, and that we cover everything, obviously, from Philadelphia to Scranton to District 3 and District 11 and District 1, and with all of the 6A and 5A teams that are obviously down in the Philadelphia area, through all the 3A and 4A schools that are all over through, like I said, District 4 and that. I got a chance to watch the Wyomissing Southern Columbia game last weekend here in Reading, which was something special to see Jim Roth and Bob Wolfram go at it. And it was very funny because Bob, and we've had him on the show, you and I, in a state preview that year that they were playing Central Valley, was it not? I mean, but anyway, so Coach Wolfram's coming out after halftime, and in the local newspaper here in Reading, there's these picks, and I'm on the thing here, and it showed that I had picked Southern Columbia over Wyomissing, in the newspaper. So coming out of halftime, Wyomissing was out 28-0. And I'm just sitting on the bench there on the sidelines. Coach Wolfram, just a beeline out of the locker room, coming right over to me and just goes like, hey, you know what? I read the newspaper too. So you picked against us, huh? And a lot of the other coaches there were on me because I didn't pick Wyo over Southern Columbia. But those are some of the games that we'll cover, there on Fresh Set of Downs. Yeah, nice picture of
Yeah,
of
you had sent me this picture. Sorry, it took me a minute to find it. But of Coach Wolfram and Coach Roth, from those two programs that I'm assuming this was after the game.
it was.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, there's like, I think Coach Wolfram has like 300 and 90 wins now, and actually, this Coach Roth was going for number 500 here, and unfortunately, did not get it. But Southern Columbia had a few uncharacteristic miscues in the first half. Wyomissing took advantage of it. Wyomissing has a dynamite running back who's only a sophomore, Justice Hardy, had 4 touchdowns, one of them a couple 11 yarders, and then like a 46 yarder, and then a short one. But wow, and you can see, look at the size of those YO linemen there. YO, I tell you what, a very impressive performance there in 4A. That's a team, obviously, that I think Wpial fans want to keep an eye on, is why I'm missing this year, because they have just reloaded, friends.
And that's a team where, like you said, we're certainly familiar with their battles with Central Valley and 3A championship games. And I think that they played them 2 years in a row, right? I
Yeah.
believe. And I think when they played probably the second time, I remember we talked about that between I think close to 300 wins that Coach Lyons has at Central Valley, and then the 300 plus that Coach Wolfram has, it might have been the state championship game with the most combined victories between
Yeah.
two head coaches. And I'm thinking this game probably had, I don't know for sure. We'd probably have to ask our friends at PA Football History if this game had the most combined
I
victories
don't
between
know.
two head coaches. But I mean, 300 plus and almost 500 is going to be tough to top.
Yeah, tough to top.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for that, bringing up that picture. I waited the whole game for this, to be able to get out there and get this picture, because I knew it was going to be something very special.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just so cool that, week 0 has given teams these kind of opportunities to go play these games, because these two teams probably wouldn't have played each other if we didn't have a week 0 where you could go kind of schedule whoever you wanted and try and find some of these matchups to test your team as you get into the season.
Well, why I'm missing has an enormous difficulty in scheduling. Um, they're the next 2 weeks they're playing Interact teams, non-PIAA teams, in the Interact League from suburban Philadelphia, because they can't find anybody to play them. Bigger schools won't play them because there's a chance of them beating them, and obviously in other parts of the state, that's just a killer on your power ranking if you lose to a team in a lower classification, and obviously anybody below them won't play him either. So one of the shortfalls that the Lancaster Lebanon League, I think, had when they combined the Berks League and all the Lancaster Lebanon League teams, is they created 5 sections rather than 4, and didn't really solve the problems that all of these teams have in District 3, and that is they have difficulty in creating a schedule, which you don't have in the Wpial, because they schedule everything for you. So
Mm-hmm.
jury's still out on what the best thing is. All I know is that what the Mid-Penn Conference did this last year was very similar. It's kind of like a mini Wpial, and that is they basically went down to 4 sections. They play 9 league games in the 4 conferences that they have now. And they just basically eliminated, out of conference there. And unfortunately, I think that that's going to permeate through the rest of District 3, because none of the other teams then can schedule any Mid-Penn teams for non-league games. So everybody's going to be combining leagues into super leagues now. And um, so, we talk about the fact of, there's so much change because of the classifications, because of the 6 classifications, so many teams are up and down. You just talked about, Bell Vernon, 3A champ. Well, now they're playing at 4A, and Central Valley up and down. And then you couple the fact of all these leagues now that are recombining, and there's very little consistency in how teams can schedule opponents now. I mean, it's really a crapshoot.
Yeah, that is one of the things that the Wpial back in the early 2000s, I believe, uh, basically just took the reins and said, "Hey, we're going to schedule you weeks 1 through 9, and we're gonna make your schedules. We're not leaving it up to teams anymore to try and go find opponents and things like that." And I think in the long run, it's worked out very well because now they and I've always been very critical of the Whippeal's scheduling structure, and I think they've made some significant improvements, over the last few cycles, over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. They've made some significant improvements in their scheduling. They still align all their conferences. Conference in the Whippeal is only teams from a singular classification. We have no mixed classification conferences like other districts have. But the Whippeal making the schedule for everyone does give everyone a good baseline. And like we talked about a little earlier with some of these non-conference games that they've tried to create some matchups of premier teams against premier teams or rival teams against each other or neighboring up and coming teams against each other. And even on the rest of the slate, that even some ones that weren't listed in our games of the week, but a couple schools that have kind of been down on their luck and trying to do some rebuilding now got scheduled against each other. So that's a good opportunity. One of those teams is going to come out with a victory in some of those games. So good opportunity to just kind of start trying to rebuild those programs too, instead of just continually getting shelled by the the Clairtons and the Aliquippas of the world. That and that's nothing against Aliquippa. Aliquippa goes out and
No,
plays they play. There's nothing against Clairton, right? That
right.
I mean, there were years I remember where Clairton put up like 82 points multiple times in a year. And that was back when, they had that 66 game winning streak and all
Sure.
that. But, and I would always argue with people on Twitter and they would be like, oh, they shouldn't be running up the score. I'm like, they've got like 20 kids on their roster. They don't have enough guys
Yeah,
to
right. There's
take
no
out their
second
good
team
player.
out
Right.
there. It's not
It's
like
like,
you can bring in the reserves. They're
right.
playing the whole
They're
game. I mean, the
playing
starters.
their starters are sophomores. Like, what do you want to do? Bring in eighth graders to play? Like, it's like they don't have anyone else, and you're not going to take a knee, so you're going to run the ball. And if they don't tackle you, they don't tackle you. And it's so it's one of those things where I think the Whippeal's done a good job of trying to schedule like against like, as far as, and it's always hard to predict who's going to be good, but you kind of know who the traditional powerhouses are.
Sure.
So if you start to kind of match those teams up, I think it goes a long way, and it creates better matchups for the fans too. It gets more people out to the stadiums and gets more hype for some of these games, which is really cool too as a
Yeah.
fan. Because like we always talk about, right? We're fans. We're fans
We're
first.
fans first. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
my
I
gosh. I mean,
our show
fans
motto.
first, and having an opportunity for me to spend some time with Coach Wolf from there. He's always very generous of his time, and I've gotten to know Coach Roth over the last couple years as well, spending some time with him and it's just an incredible opportunity to get to know these men on a personal level. And if you think that they're special from afar, just wait till you like get to know them a little bit, and then you find out really the people that they are, and you can understand why they're successful at what they do.
Yeah, and our motto for this show has always been that we want to be entertaining and informative, and we, try to thread that needle of doing both. But I'm always, continually impressed with all the coaches that are so generous with their time and willing to come on with us and talk with us about their programs. We're hoping, we had two great coaches on our season preview show that I have a ton of respect for, and you're just hearing these guys talk. It's like, yeah, it's you can see why players gravitate towards these coaches and want to play for them. And we've been lucky over the years to have, talked to Coach Wolfram. We talked to Coach Warfield at Aliquippa, who retired this past year, and Aliquip has a new head coach this year. So we'll see how that goes. Best of luck to Coach Patrick in his first game at the helm of the Quips team. And Coach Humbert at Bell Vernon has been on the show a few times. So we've been very lucky to have some great coaches on the show, and hopefully we're able to continue this season to be entertaining and informative, and do stuff that our fans enjoy. And if there's folks out there that want to get more involved with the show, if you have if there's GoFundMe's for things that you want us to help promote, just shoot me a message on Twitter. I'm happy to
absolutely.
help
We'll
do
get them
those
on the
kind of
show
things.
and let them talk about their charities and
Yeah.
fundraisers from school. If there's any special fundraisers that are going on, I'm more than happy to promote that on the program.
Yep. And if there's any private businesses out there that want us to talk about what they're doing and get their name in here, we could have a sponsor for the player of the week. We
Sure.
could have some other little sponsorship things. If people want to, just reach out to us, let us know. But yeah, we're here. We're just trying to promote what's happening around the WPIL, talk about all the good stories, and talk about the thread that needle of the history and the storytelling of what's happening
Yeah, we'll
now.
throw
And
in a little
yeah.
state rankings and a little Eastern stuff there. At least keep the fans, up to speed on what's going on in the Eastern half, because eventually you're gonna run into them anyway.
Yeah, and I think I saw in the chat Chris mentioned about Roman Catholic, that they're going to be really good, and that's a team to watch in 5A this year, because since Imhotep Charter had to move up to 6A, potentially you're going to have a District 12 Philly League championship game between Imhotep out of the public bracket and St. Joe's Prep out of the Catholic League bracket. So one of those two is going to get knocked out more or less in, like, I guess it's the round of 16 in the state playoffs. But 5A now is kind of wide open on that half of the bracket. So Roman Catholic is kind of the presumed favorites, and they've got a good squad from everything I've heard. So should be interesting to watch as we go. So thanks everyone for joining us this week. It was another really fun show. I can't believe we went, over an hour again, but
Yeah.
hey, we'll have some long shows this year too, as we start to get into things and break down playoff scenarios and things like that. And there's a lot of other people doing great work out there too. Our friend Carlos Zovko, the Wpial Insider, started a little show that he's done. I saw him posted on Twitter. He does some great work promoting things, and he had some highlight clips, so you can check out his stuff. He's on the KDKA broadcast as well. He's got some good stuff going on to help kids get recruiting tips and things like that, so you can check him out as well at the Wpial Insider. Everyone knows the Wpial Insider. But thanks everyone for tuning into the Wpial Blitz show this week. We appreciate everyone's support, and hope you all had fun. I had a blast doing it.
Yeah, we always have a blast, and it's always great getting together, my friend. And so listen, thanks to all of our fans. Tell everybody about it, and we'll be back probably next Tuesday night, because of the holiday, at 9:30. So for Ian McMeans, I'm Bruce Badgley. Listen, thanks for joining us on the WPIAL Blitz Show.